The minutes of June 5th, up for discussion.
Couple minor typos.
Typo?
On the page 2, Mike Lottie of Industrial Engineering?
No, it's...
Industria, okay. And then, and I wasn't sure, on the last page 4, Robert Nunemacher asked if panels will straddle the own line, town line?
No, it's the own line, yeah.
Own
Yeah.
line.
So if you could
That's
just
it.
mark that correction, Scott, please.
You gonna fix this, and we'll sign it later?
Yeah. Well, you can, it's just a correction on the last page.
Yeah.
So you can initial it if you want, and I'll just
Okay.
switch out the page.
No.
Is that a motion?
No.
All right, I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes from June 5th with the corrections.
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
I'll abstain, I was out.
Any filings?
No filings.
We have Form A.
No, we don't.
No, we don't? Okay,
Future meeting.
all right. And any correspondence?
No.
No correspondence. All right.
I can tell you about the conference I went to last week.
That'd be good.
Okay, but first, why don't we have Wally Baker tell you about our trip to Mass Historic last week?
Okay, 4 of us from Sutton went into Mass Historic, where the commission itself was having the final vote on whether or not to submit the National Historic District from Manchog to the Department of the Interior to be put on the National Register. And it was quite successful. We were unanimously approved, and and we're fortunate because we had 2 members of the community from the Manchog community. One was like 4 generations, another one was 2 or 3, got up and gave testimony to this. Jen gave a great outline, and I had a few comments at the end. And I think they were kind of surprised. They're not used to getting people from west of 495 into Boston to actually go to these sessions.
Right.
Usually just the consultant just presents this big book, and they just sign off on that. They don't
Right.
get to see anybody from the community. So I think it seemed to be quite well received. They said they should hear back from them sometime by the end of the year. Hopefully it'll be sometime in the fall, but we'll just see. It's now totally out of our hands. And we can, I kind of tied it into our open space master plan, and the fact that actually last month we already did the land swap down there, so we could extend the nature trail, or the Manchog River Trail, the Mumford River Trail. So I think all in all, it went very well.
The National Park Service is the arm of the government that will actually do the approval at the federal level. And if it's approved at the federal level, it's on the National Register and automatically on the state register as well. But there's, over 180 properties in this district. So, and the consultant was excellent, and and she said to the commission and various members of Mass Historic over the process that Manchog is by far one of the most unique communities she's ever worked in terms of the history that the residents have maintained about their village and the number of descendants that still live in the village, because it was an original mill town. And a lot of the people that were brought to the mill town were from Quebec, and the Bessettes and the Bousquets, and they're still there, their families. So it's really cool, and just a wealth of pictures and memorabilia that the residents all hold and cherish and are very, very proud of. So, and she conveyed that to members of Mass Historic and the commission, which was a 15-member panel we were in front of, and one of 5 nominations this year. So, last, of course, alphabetically, unfortunately, but we had a nice lunch at the JFK Library, so that was nice.
Oh, yeah.
And who paid for the consultant? How did that happen?
It was a grant. We applied for a grant,
Grant, town
and then it
of
was
Sutton.
matched by an appropriation at town meeting. So it was a 50% grant we applied for. So It was very successful, very successful. And then I went to MAPD, Mass Association of Planning Directors Conference, last week, and I will copy you out those materials for your next meeting. You'll have the annual case law update from Copeland and Page, and which gives you all the latest case law, because as you know, whatever the latest case law is the law on a subject. So there's some interesting stuff in there. Got some information actually that I think I'll be working with the highway superintendent on. It's a Commonwealth Compact. It's for basically road improvements that have to do with walkability and safety, like sidewalks and things like that. That will be useful in the Village Center Overlay District and maybe West Sutton and some other areas of town too, as well as just general road upgrades. So it's an interesting program with some funding availability. So I'm going to look into that with him, in partnership with him. So that was in Pittsfield, which was an old GE town.
Right.
Put all their eggs in one basket, and then the basket ran
When they
off.
left.
And they're reinventing themselves as part of that arts corridor out there. So now the Colonial Theater is fully rehabbed in Pittsfield. It's beautiful. We had a tour of the Colonial Theater, and it's lovely. And what I found interesting was on my walk with the Northbridge planner, we walked around, and I don't know that I've ever seen so many churches in such a small area, all operating, all different denominations, all completely different architecture and massing and styles. I was just shocked. I mean, in a 3-mile walk, I think we counted 9 churches, all fully operating, all different denominations, very different buildings, and all very old. Late 1800s, early 1900s at the earliest. It's an interesting place.
Yeah.
And it's definitely morphing into the, a calmer, a little less beatnik Northampton and Stockbridge. It's really starting to fit in with the Lennox and the Lees and that theater network that's going through there. So they're having to reinvent themselves and figuring out that diversification is
good
good in
thing.
all things. So.
Yeah, GE facilities are huge there.
Yeah, it was an interesting community to have the conference in, because you got to look at something kind of different.
Assuming that everything goes well with the stuff Wally was involved with, what's the future when you get that designation? You get to apply for more grants?
For private landowners, it's honorary. It is literally just honorary for private landowners. For private landowners with income-producing property, like the Manchog School that is owned by George Funari. If he wants to turn that into an income-producing property, a restaurant, offices, retail, any future restoration work he wishes to do, he can get tax credits for that. Projects like the mill rehab, you can get historic tax credits for that in terms of private parties, not for residential properties on the private side yet. And then if the town wants to do things to town properties, we can apply for Mass Preservation Projects funds. We have a high ranking because we're National Register listed, so it does help us get funding for things that are historic oriented that we want to do in the village. Other than that, it's really honorary. It's just a recognition that it's a really unique place that's run through this very aggressive gamut of reviews and compiling the history and the executive summary that I do have if anybody wants copies of it. Just that executive summary is just amazing with information. Just stuff you wouldn't suspect. I mean, from, the first Fruit of the Loom mills to the Mill 1 was one, and Mill 3 were one of the first Fruit of the Loom mills in that BB&R Knights Holdings, along with some in Providence, to just the family things were just amazing. Just really interesting stuff.
And I'm assuming, because it's like our agenda tonight, and so many of our agendas, solar energy and wind power are all in the news. But the mighty Mumford might be mighty again. Because there's all kinds of neat things that are happening with water resources that haven't been tapped yet. So
I would agree.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so Forest Edge land discussion we have on the agenda.
You do have an email from me dated May 17th that relates to this discussion. But Jonathan and Michael are kind of going to give you a summary of the questions they need answers.
So, for the record, I'm Jonathan Bruce, Sutton LLC, the developer. My son Michael, who's a professional engineer, and it's time that he starts presenting, so he's the guy.
I've been presenting, but thank you for having us tonight. Again, I'm Michael Bruce from PE, Massachusetts. And we're here to talk about cell tower, possible cell tower on the Grafton land near our development. We thought it'd be important to just step back and determine how we arrived at the number of units and the open space we have. So it's 0.8 of a unit per acre. So our tract yielded 74 units in the original permit. Then we added 5 bonus units because we're going to build 5 affordables. So that's how we got to our current count of 84. There's approximately 37 acres necessary open space, which is 40% of the tract. We provide well in excess of 20 extra acres, not including the land between the buildings, but just in the Grafton piece and 10 acres in Sutton, in addition to what's on the condos property. Now, before we got a variance, we were trying to figure out how to restrict the open space from development. The problem was you couldn't convey an interest in Grafton toward the benefit of Sutton. So we couldn't deed restrict the Grafton side for Sutton's benefit, to meet Sutton's bylaw. So that's why we got a variance. The variance was requested and granted to allow the condo to be sited on 35 acres with the excess, 10 acres in Sutton, and what was the acreage in Grafton?
About 45 acres. The parcel, it was a
40
total of 45 or 47.
47 and a half
It
acres.
started out about 92 acres total,
Yes.
the total parcel. And as Michael explained, because there's no parent mechanism to deed restrict the Grafton land for the benefit of Sutton, then we looked at, okay, how do we do this? And Michael's wasn't involved at the time, but, so one of the approaches that we talked about was to get a variance to allow the condominium to exist on 35 acres, which is what it's on today. And there's a back parcel in Sutton, which is actually about 12 acres, which got you to the 47. And then there's the entire Grafton parcel that's, call it 45-ish acres. Nothing ever changed on the ground other than the association is on the 35 acres. And as Michael said, it meets the density as far as area. He gave you the formula that was used, 0.8 units per acre. And then there's the open space component, which we exceed by in excess of 20 acres, not including the area, the open space in the 35. If you look at the 35 and you subtract out the building and the driveways and the roadway, there's open space there that's not part of that 20 acres. So that's how we got to where we are and why the variance was even applied for and granted.
So the variance had the condition that the open space was to be conveyed to Sutton and Grafton, whoever part was in each town, or conveyed to a nonprofit with appropriate development restrictions. So we tried to convey the Grafton piece to Grafton. There were problems doing that. The town administrator was ill or incapacitated, and then it was just, people were busy. Maybe you could fill in more about that.
Yeah, I had sent a letter to Grafton asking them about it, never heard back. Went back and forth. I believe the town administrator at the time, former town administrator, was ill, was on an extended leave of absence. That individual is no longer with the town as far as I know. I went back and forth with conservation, and honestly, beyond that, I can't tell you what happened. Just the ball got dropped, everybody was busy, and what's important is it was never developed. The taxes were paid on both parcels over all the years. And then we get to just about a year ago, I was approached by Verizon Wireless about siting a tower on the Grafton side and as far east, as far away from Sutton as it could possibly be up on the hill. So I called Jen and said, Jen, what do we do? And she said, well, you know, probably can be done with the planning board's concurrence. It may impact density as far as number of units are concerned. So Michael quickly did the math on it, and there's 5,200 square feet of excess area. Verizon wants to be on a footprint of 3,500 square feet, so, okay, that's not gonna be a problem. Their total disturbance is 55,000 square feet. But I hesitate to even say that because they don't have an application. I believe the application is in. I don't know the current status of it, but it could move. And that's why we didn't bring plans tonight. We don't know where the driveway will be. There's wetlands considerations over there. So we said, okay, if you took out the full 55,000 as a separate parcel, it may make an impact of 1 unit, but we're not even sure if it does. So I think that's really the whole thing. So
And we have more than enough open space.
we have more than enough open space, like 20 extra acres. So the question is, how do we proceed? We know that at the end of this process, if the planning board is in concurrence that the cell tower is okay, then we'll go down that road of making sure that everything is in place to define where it's gonna be. Jen says we probably go back to the zoning board of appeals, go back to the ZBA and say, okay, this is what we're gonna do, this is what we'd like to do. The planning board says it's cool. And if you say that that's okay, then we would come in with more specific, show you where Verizon is in at the moment and stop ramping up to go back in front of the ZBA. At the end of the day, the desire would be to either convey it to a nonprofit with the appropriate development restriction, but carve out the Verizon parcel, or divide off the Verizon parcel, convey the Sutton portion to Sutton and the Grafton portion to Grafton, again, with deed restrictions that this board is comfortable with, but don't run to the board, because we can't run a deed restriction in Grafton to the town of Sutton. That's how this all broke down in the beginning. Had the entire parcel been in Sutton, it would have been easy. You know, just no development, period. But we can't, there was nobody left standing to hold that restriction, is really what it came down to. But if we put it on, if we put the deed restriction on and Grafton accepts it with the restriction, or a different nonprofit accepts it with the deed restriction, then everything is done. So the only question is there support for us to proceed to site a cell tower, recognizing that we have plenty of area to site the tower and well in excess of the open space. That's why we're here.
So you have my email, just kind of breaking down the issues. So there's a few issues that we need to go through. So obviously, there was the original grant of the special permit based on the density at the time, which Michael has gone over, as 74 plus the bonus units, for a total of 84 units. And there was open space shown on that plan, more than enough, but there is a plan on file, special permit on file that says these units, this land. There's a subsequent Form A plan that pulls those lots off, and an accompanying variance from the zoning board that says, okay, you can have this development on these 35 acres. The reason I am pretty much adamant that the zoning board needs to be involved is because the zoning board granted a variance based on a set of facts. And that set of facts said, we have this acreage in Grafton, the application and the detailed explanation of request that was supported, was filed by Jonathan for grant of that, basically said, you know, the intent and the purpose of this is to assure no development of this land other than the potential for water infrastructure, because that was being looked into at the time. So the zoning board made a decision on an application which was a very set of facts. And I'm not saying they wouldn't make a different decision now, but there's an application on record, there's a decision on record, and it says, you know, it's with assure no development of this land, and it will have appropriate development restrictions. And they were very specific, nothing other than water stuff. So, in the least, I would say it needs to go back to the zoning board for an amendment to that variance or an issuance of a new variance, however they decide, saying that, you know what, it's okay with this acreage pulled out. And I think it needs to be a separate parcel with their whole development area, because that development needs frontage on an actual roadway somewhere, not part of the open space. It's too quagmiry that way. But again, they can talk about that. But the planning board, I see your role as, you approved a project, you approved a Form A that split off the open space. Do you think it's possible? And I would, my discussion with Jonathan and Michael just briefly was, the density was based on a specific acreage. If you pull out part of that acreage, you need to adjust the density based on what's left now. You can't kind of double dip. I get my cell tower and the number of units that used to include the cell tower land.
Right.
So like he said, we need to just perform that calculation for the full development area that's going to be pulled for the tower. And if he loses a unit, he loses a unit. Because we want to be consistent and treat all projects similar to this the same. So I don't see that it's not doable. I just see that there's a process that needs to go through.
Right.
And I think it, as Jonathan and Michael have asserted, I think it kind of starts with you agreeing in the majority, if that's what you so choose, that it's doable and these are the steps. And then obviously the zoning board has to be in concurrence that they're comfortable amending their variance or whatever. They're well over the amount of open space they need, and the issue of density can be dealt with as long as it's dealt with through a public process and just a way that protects both them, both towns, and even Verizon going forward, because you don't want any kind of cloud on any of this.
And that's really the crux of this. Look at that. We're very pragmatic. If this board says, no way, forget it, we're out of here, and that's the end of it. But if the board says, the numbers work, show us the numbers, adjust the density, we're talking, pull the 55,000 feet out, the total disturbance, make it a separate lot, and go back to the ZBA, if that's acceptable, we'll go that way, and we'll come back here as soon as we can with a revised plan to show this board exactly what we'd be doing. And we're just looking for guidance at this point.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just curious, have you approached the condo association?
No,
Have they?
no, haven't had any discussions at all with them.
I myself would have a tough time voting for this if
That's why I said it needs to be a public process.
Right.
Right.
And
Yeah,
obviously, if they go back before the zoning board, or they go back
This is their
before
open
you,
space.
they're notified.
This is
Right.
part of the open space, it's part of
Right.
the agreement.
Yeah, so that's why it needs to be a public
Right.
process.
That would be very important.
that's why we're here.
And at this point, these parcels are going to be available for conveyance to a municipal entity or nonprofit. That has not happened.
That has not happened, that's
You
correct.
still own these.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's where it all broke down 10 years ago or so. But exactly right, so we're looking to just bundle the whole thing up as one thing,
Fix it, be done with it.
fix it one time, convey presumably the Sutton parcel to the town of Sutton, the carve off wherever Verizon would be. And again, there's a whole, Mr. Anderson, there's a whole process. Everybody's gonna be totally aware of everything, but we came here, is the board even receptive to it? They're fully transparent. If the board says, look, we don't even wanna hear from you, that's a completely different position, then you know something, the numbers actually work. Let's put it out into the public meeting, the public hearing forum, and see where it goes. We're just looking for that guidance. I don't want to start ramping up with the ZBA and the association and the whole thing. If the
Right.
board here says, you know something, forget it.
So you've run the calculations, that's what this is, it all satisfies and can be done,
Yes.
and still achieve the density requirements of the town of Sutton, provide the open space, et cetera, and carve out this parcel.
We'll fix the density
The
result
will
to make it
probably
work.
need to be adjusted.
Adjusted,
Right.
okay.
But it's a
The
minor
dens-
adjustment.
Correct.
And the
And
open-
so they bring in a revised site plan, losing a unit
Well, we
or
were
whatever.
we were actually talking a revised site plan to break them all into duplexes, which in the association, they are supportive of. And I'm glad to have those discussions to break it up, so
So
we
he's
would
bringing
do.
in an amended site
We're
plan
gonna bring in,
anyways,
we're gonna bring in an amended
so
plan
he would
anyway.
just lose the unit or whatever
Exactly.
as part of that process.
Well, let's go, we have enough, you want to chime in on opinions? Let this go forward on its own merit,
I want to
or,
make sure that I fully understand. The tower is proposed to be in Grafton.
Correct.
open space in Grafton.
Right, which belongs to a development that's in Sutton Forest Edge.
It's part of
right?
the consideration for this project.
Correct.
Right.
So, a portion, if you carve out a portion of a parcel to go to Verizon, Verizon would own that parcel?
No, I would continue, Sutton LLC would maintain ownership of that parcel, and because that parcel would then be separated from the original 92 acres, there would be a density adjustment in
Okay.
Forest Edge.
So, it would basically be similar to like a retreat lot, where the access is in Sutton.
No,
No,
the Sutton, it's got
Grafton.
frontage in Grafton.
Yeah, that's why
It
it
is.
needs to be cut off and have its own frontage
Right,
in
there's
Grafton. to
actually
even
more
pull a building
Grafton
permit.
frontage than there is Sutton frontage.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's two stretches of frontage on
Right.
Full Street.
So.
Definitely needs to be a public hearing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Um,
And specifically for the Forest Edge residents who
Right.
bought into the concept of the open
Right.
space that we
What I
sat
would-
here and.
What I would envision is actually starting with the ZBA. If this board says something that, works, just give us all the documentation and get the ZBA, I would start with the ZBA,
and
because
see
if you
if
can't
they'll
get the,
amend it, yeah. and
yeah,
see
if you
they'll
can't
amend it
get the
vote a new
variance or
one.
amend the variance, the whole thing's over.
Right,
But I'm just looking for guidance, if we get the variance and it goes through that public hearing process, and you come here, and it goes through this public hearing process, is there a pathway? That's the only pathway that, based upon what Jen is saying, and we agree, the only pathway is through the ZBA and the planning board, it's just a question of who's first. So we figured, come here first and see, I don't want to go to the variance process, and have the planning board says, no way, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
because I will get the slip that says, what do you guys think?
Right,
So,
of course. Look, it's a small town.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what's going on. It's got to be, everybody has to be on board, or it's not going to happen.
Any other questions? So I would, yeah,
So this one's a tough one because I'm kind of flip-flopping in my mind around this one, right? Because I look at it and say, you're benefiting from something that was supposed to happen that didn't happen, and now there's an opening for this, for you to possibly, George, just let me finish, please.
Yeah, sure.
So you're benefiting from the fact that it really wasn't completed what it was supposed to, which is the land was supposed to be preserved, right? And so I'm kind of struggling with that piece of it, because it's like a loophole you're kind of getting in through. But then there's another part of me that says, well, there's plenty of open space, so I'm kind of like struggling with this one. So, but I'm not saying I'm not close to letting it go through the process, it's just something that I'm wrestling within myself. Because in all essence, if this had been followed through and the land was preserved, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
There still could be having the conversation, but it would be from a different perspective.
Yeah.
But in going back just a bit, before I did anything with Verizon, my call was to Jen, is this doable? Because if this is where it started, for exactly what you're saying,
Yeah.
is it doable? And if these other steps had followed and it was in a nonprofit, the nonprofit would be here asking for the same thing.
Or if they were an open space
Right.
nonprofit, they probably wouldn't be, so who knows?
Well,
But anyway,
it's
so
hard to-
regardless, it's hard
right.
to speculate, so.
Right.
But I myself feel that you should go to this ZBA first, and based on what they say, that's would be my.
We're just looking for a pulse of this board.
That'd be
If
my
there's-
pulse,
if
would be to have the
there's-
ZBA rule on it, because they
Sure.
were the ones that put all the stipulations
Sure.
down in the first place.
but
Yeah, I kind of agree that, if, I realize why you're starting here. Is it doable? I think so. Is it easy? Probably not. But you gotta find out if you can change the variance to.
Well, the ZBA is an incredibly high standard. The variance is an incredibly high standard. That's why we would start there. And that's, if there's consideration here, and it seems like at least it's, not leave and don't come back, it's not, then we would.
You haven't heard from all the board members yet?
Right.
Not yet.
Just to kind of refresh my memory, you say there was a density of 74 units. I've been up there,
Right.
and how many units are actually constructed?
36 plus the new building is 37 and 38.
Okay.
There's 36 occupied right now.
35.
35. Right. One's being rebuilt. Thank you, Michael.
Through the chair, and I think the strategy of going to the CBA makes sense. Forest Edge, from the very beginning, has been a learning experience for everyone involved, including us. And with perfect hindsight, there's some things that as a planning board, we probably shouldn't have done, but the boulevard's there. So I'd want to tell you that I'm open to continue learning as this thing evolves. But it's a complicated situation, and there's a part of me that's curious about that, because I think there's more complicated situations coming before us, so I pay attention to everything we do as we move forward, because we're setting precedent. And there'll probably be more things coming our way. Do this, and the only guy that doesn't have a cell phone, are the phones gonna work now because of this, or is there gonna be another tower that goes up and people still don't have reception?
Not in Weston.
There's people here that towers go up and their phones still don't work. So, I mean, Verizon better know what they're doing. Is this gonna finally turn everybody's phone on?
What's really, you're exactly right. It's, a lot of this is, I call it uncharted territory, but when you think about it, we're going to be applying in the town of Sutton for a variance that impacts Sutton land in order to make a Grafton parcel available for something else. Think, when you think that through, I mean, normally you would say, okay, you go to you want to put a cell tower, go to the ZBA in Grafton, but no, with our commitment has always been to the town of Sutton to make sure that that association and that underlying land stays in compliance with zoning.
Right.
That's the key to
So
this.
you know, there is discussion with Joe Layton, who is the Grafton planner. He is in this loop. And as I said in my email, and perhaps even the town of Grafton to some degree. So Jonathan and Michael need to continue to have discussions with Grafton to make sure there's nothing they're going to need other than the process for the cell
Right.
tower itself at Grafton.
Grafton, we could do what we want in Grafton, but we'll compromise the Sutton land, and we're not willing to do that. Okay, that the reality is, we could go forward and say, and we said, no, they have to be in full compliance in both towns. So the Grafton parcel can support a cell tower if you take it completely out of the equation without considering the impact in Sutton. We won't do that.
And the planners talk to each other, so it wouldn't
Yeah.
happen either.
There's no
This whole thing came onto my radar screen because Jonathan had talked about it vaguely, but then Joe, the planner, said, hey, what about this thing, not doing forestry, cell tower? What do you know about this? Because we all talk to each other weekly. The primary person I was with at the conference last week was the Northbridge planner. We did the church tour together, walked around and we're talking about town business while we were looking at all those churches. So great communication in the valley, so can't slip much past us.
Well,
Not that they were trying to.
I would say, this project's been around a long time, as you know, right? And I've probably with Bob been on the board as long as this and started with you in 2004. So I recognize that things change. This has been, I know, a slow project. Half the units are built and occupied, so I'm sure there's some other economics that make sense. And if that works out, then the process, through the due process, then I think that's fine.
Great.
Wally, you were making some comments, but I didn't get your position.
Well, my position would be to go to the ZBA, get more clarification on this.
She needs to weigh in.
Okay,
We have one
that's
more.
done. The ZBA?
One more.
I agree. Go through the zoning board of appeals and especially having abutters notices going out and they get a chance to come in and you can see how they feel about it, and that's my opinion.
So, based upon what we're hearing, we will ramp up immediately to file a variance request with the zoning board of appeals to amend the restriction. Leave the land the way it is, but amend the restriction to be able to carve off that parcel for that use.
Right.
And allow the condominium to continue to exist on the 35 acres at a time.
Right.
That will be the nature of the variance, and we'll see where it goes.
And I would run the density counts,
We'll run the
include that
density,
adjustment
sure.
in the zoning board
Absolutely.
application, or it'll come up in my comments.
Right.
No, we'll do that for sure. And
Okay.
the next time, I'm presuming that the planning board chimes in on a recommendation to the ZBA?
They asked me,
Okay. so
and
you're-
if I
okay.
need to, I
Okay.
ask the board.
Okay, so we're all on the same page, and the next time we're here will either be for that discussion or an amended site plan
All at once.
all at once,
Would be-
either way to.
Keep it
split
better.
Yeah, okay.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Good night now.
Good night. Brought your umbrella.
It just started, didn't it? Yeah, go ahead. So we have a public hearing. Go ahead, Bob.
In accordance with the provisions of the Sutton zoning bylaw, section 4C, site plan review, the planning board will hold a hearing on the application of Whittier Farm, Sutton, Mass. for temporary stockpiling of logs and wood chips by Hurley Firewood and Land Clearing on a 3-acre parcel located at 122 Town Farm Road. The hearing will be held at the Sutton Town Hall, 3rd floor, on Monday, the 19th of June at 7:15 planning board time.
So Wayne, you've stepped off the board,
Yes, I have.
and Wally Baker, you've stepped into his position.
Yes.
So we had a conversation about this proposed project approximately 4 weeks ago. When I came in tonight, the map that's in your packet, the log and chip storage area is actually on a hayfield. It should be the cross-check section just to the right-hand side of it,
Sorry,
which would be the 3 acres.
this one right here?
No, that's wood,
This
the
one?
cross-check section, kind of the pork chop shaped piece.
Well, yeah, that's what the arrow's pointing to.
Oh, all right. So on a black and white, you can't see the arrow.
No, you
Sorry.
can't.
Okay.
Sorry, this is the color version. There's an arrow pointing to the check
Oh,
section.
okay.
That's
All
why
right.
it's checked. Sorry,
Oh,
I should
okay.
have reviewed the black and white copies once they were made. I apologize.
I,
All right, cool.
nothing has changed since we spoke last time, other than we were asked to do a public hearing. And there is one review form from the fire department, which says over 300 yards of chips. I don't know what particular permit might be needed, but I will have a conversation with Matt if we're successful tonight, so.
There really was, this is not a typical site plan, we're not constructing a structure, this is proposed as a temporary use. So it was not an application where I would go through a typical site plan checklist. So you don't have a checklist for me because it's not your usual. And it's just for our previous discussions, whether you think it's allowable and what you think concerns might be and what conditions you may or may not want to place, or if you just don't think it's allowable for some reason. So,
Can you just orientate me on this?
this is
Town Farm Road,
something where-
okay. This is the farmhouse at
This
the
is
top of
such
the
a
hill,
big gap.
Okay.
bad corner before you drop down to West Sutton.
This is the steep hill, and
Right.
that cell tower location's up here somewhere? Is that
Cell
where you
tower is
have it?
located
Oh, this
right
one
here.
Okay, all right. I
They
got you
have,
now.
by the way, they moved the equipment in, they're supposed to start there this week, so,
The cell
good.
tower
yeah,
location?
finally.
Good.
This is the dirt road that runs into Oxford,
This one?
down to the state property. So we cleared, 2 years ago, Hurley cleared approximately 20 acres of land with an opening to the dirt road here. It is our intent to finish clearing this. He clear cut it, the stumps are there. He's looking for a place to stockpile log length firewood and chips to take out some of the highs and lows in his business. In exchange, he's interested in helping us pull the stumps out and grind them on site, and then the chips from those stumps would leave. We would be left with all the soil that comes up with the chips. It would allow us to facilitate clearing that property for future agricultural land. When it was cut, there's 2 sections in there that were wetlands, and we did stay in excess of 100 feet from them when we cut it. NRCS, which is the agricultural division that we deal with, actually had mapped it as we were proposing to cut it, and kind of marked out where the wetlands were for us. It is not my intent to do any construction in there. It's APR land. It's simply a way for me to move a little bit quicker, I believe, in clearing it, making it usable land. He would clear and look at 3 acres and use it, and then over the next 2.5 years, stump it, and we would have access in and out to pile manure in there and other things,
Right.
which would help us a great deal.
So what can you do with a ground-up stump? They burn that? Is that burnable?
Well, the chips are going to the
Chips.
to the fire plant,
Mhm.
electrical plant.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would be going as mulch somewhere, because it's gonna go through a tub grinder, or if it would go in with the chips and go to the furnace.
But it's a chip.
Yeah.
Same kind of chip.
Yeah, well,
a
it's more of
stump.
a grinding, it's not cut.
It's a
as
tough,
flake.
tough thing, those stumps.
So I did, Jen sent out a mailing to various people up and down Town Farm Road from roughly Helgeson's at the top of the hill down. I met with every one of them except one. I don't know their name, and they weren't home the day I stopped there. I don't know. Okay. Right around the corner?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Wayne Whittier. My son and my daughter are behind you, John and Samantha. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I did not hear your door. Nobody was there one thing, sorry.
So this is a public hearing. If you want to speak during a public hearing, identify yourself. You can ask any questions you want.
Sure. Quick questions.
Identify yourself. Yep.
Mike Roach at Town 115, Town Farm. Yeah, our only concern was, you know, the nature of what temporary meant, and I understand, I think I just caught it was 2.5 years is temporary.
Right.
And then the other question was, you know, exactly where was it located, and I get exactly where
Does that
it's
work?
located.
Now
And
that
then
you can see it in color.
And then my third was, you know, being a commercial business, what type of impact is this gonna be, truck, you know, traffic-wise, truck traffic in and out, and, you know, how's that gonna affect? It seems like a commercial business being put in a residential area to me, but, you know, I'm not looking to stop progress.
So our conversation with Hurley's have been, what do they need versus what we're looking to get out of the project? They need to put up to 250 cord of log length fiber. It's not processed. So they're looking for a landing for it, so that when they have a market, they can go back in, load the trailer, and leave. That's done with the log loader on the trailer. Secondly, they're looking to do the same thing basically with wood chips. They have contracts to feed the furnace at the electrical plant, and if they make more chips per day than they can get rid of, they were looking for a place to stockpile them. We put a number of 3,000 yards, and obviously the fire chief wants to know some information about that. We'll be happy to do that. So that I would be surprised if there's more than 2 loads a day that get dumped in there, because they have to fill a contract first, and then the surplus would go. But then as they're in between projects, on their end, they would load a trailer, maybe take 1 or 2 loads out a day to satisfy the contracts of where the chips are going. We run trucks up and down that street pretty regularly. Most of the time John's one of them driving. We took 15 loads of silage off the top of the hill today. We've done that. Those 2 children represent the 5th generation. And like I said, except for your family, everyone up and down the street who didn't show up tonight was okay with what we were proposing. I don't envision 10, 12, 15 trailers a day. I don't think it's possible for them.
And they're not gonna be processing all the time down there.
No,
It
the only-
only during the stumping, which is.
Right, they gotta get the stumps out. I don't know exactly when you moved in there.
2 years.
Okay, so were you there when they clear cut?
No.
Okay. It's over 1,000 feet off of Town Farm Road. And they were in there about 3 weeks. And most of the people in the area didn't even know they were there. And I don't think it'll take them more than a week or 10 days to grind all the stuff.
Yeah, no, anything that goes with the farm is fine. I just didn't know how long this other commercial business was gonna be up there.
What we would like to do is give them enough time, because they're gonna be doing this in between for us as well as there. And I was the one that came up with the end of December 19th, I'd like to be done and gone. And if we're not done clearing, then we can go, because we haven't lived up to their end of it yet.
Right.
And the ultimate idea behind it too is that we gain the land. And I know John is without an excavator right now, but as soon as he can be in a piece of machinery that puts that land to use, we have the ability to crop it. So the quicker they're out, the quicker we can get to making more silage and corn and doing the ag side of things. And while Hurley is commercial, it's in the forestry business, which does fall under the Department of Ag, and sustainable resources for power. So.
Now, I just wanted to address, just let you know from the use perspective, the first stop on this whole question was to go see the building commissioner, who's our zoning enforcement officer and does zoning interpretation. And basically, even though the product that Hurley produces is used in the power industry, they are a logging and forestry company. Logging and forestry, no matter where the end product is used, is protected under Mass General Law as an agricultural use. And obviously, the stumping work that they're doing, they wouldn't even have to ask us permission for that, because that's part of their direct on-site. The only reason the building commissioner suggested, and one of our lead assessors wisely suggested we go through a public process, is to let everybody know that's what's going on in the area. And because even though both uses, Whittier and Hurley, are protected agricultural uses, what Hurley is stockpiling is not produced on this site. So it's still protected, but the building commissioner said, you know what, it's doable, it's allowable, but those logs didn't come off this site, so let's go through a public hearing process for an extra layer, as if this was an operation that's not to the scale of Whittier Farms. If we have agriculture on a lot under 5 acres, it's open to a site plan review process, and that's kind of how he saw this. Hurley's only going to use 2 to 3 acres, so it's still agricultural, it's still protected, it's still doable, but it's less than 3 acres. And if you go in strict accordance with our bylaw, that needs a site plan review process like this, and public input and expression of concerns and mitigation of concerns. So, agricultural use, but smaller scale, so let's put it through the process.
Thank you.
You bet.
Anything else from the public? Any comments from up here? Bob?
But just because a board member, someone chooses to be on this board and gets elected to this board, it's important that we all get held to the same standard. So I just appreciate Wayne coming in and doing it, because when he asked me, I said exactly what Jen did. It sounds like it's just doable, but don't get caught up with someone saying you can get away with it because you're on the planning board. We have to be held to the same standard.
I would much rather meet you here tonight than
On the end of
with
enforcement.
another issue.
Yeah. No, and that's, we have to, and moving forward, we have to
Absolutely.
set the same standard for everyone that goes off the
Right.
planning board or operates a farm and isn't on a board. We all get held to the same standard.
Right.
So,
Now, Wayne, we talked about, regardless of the fact of whether it's 2 loads or 6 loads, that it's more treacherous for a vehicle to go from this site towards West Sutton Road. So we had talked about the fact how it would probably not be smart to encourage or maybe even allow trucks to go that way, that they should be going back out to Central Turnpike, coming and going from Central Turnpike.
I think it really would fire a guy if he went the other way in his equipment. That's crazy. Yeah. It's just
I would definitely like to see them come down Central Turnpike, and
no other way.
we've had that discussion.
There's no way.
That may be appropriate for the board to condition that.
Yeah, it's a condition.
Like,
And maybe
Yeah,
even for a
condition.
temporary sign to be put, just for, because they might have different drivers on different days, so
They
maybe even
have,
just.
they have a father-son operation
Okay,
and a single driver that I'm aware of who lives in Sutton, that I know personally.
okay.
So
It's up to the board.
I don't believe that they're gonna be jumping drivers. They're gonna be waiting for people to check the GPS to figure out which way they're going and get lost down the backside.
Yeah.
I just don't see it.
Obviously, you just want to avoid that if that's a possibility.
Yeah. Any other comments up here? We have a motion?
What's the motion? To,
You're gonna,
approve-
it's an
approve.
application for site plan approval, so your motion would be to grant site plan approval. You want a minimum condition that they have to comply with the comments and gain approval of the fire department on the proposed use, and that truck trips should, for this operation, should be restricted to and from Central Turnpike. Those are your minimum conditions, and then anything else you want
You
to
have to
add.
comply with CMR 1.0, chapter 31.
Right.
That's a fire.
I'll make that motion, Jen. You can write it.
So that's 527 CMR 1.0, chapter 31, forest products.
Fire and to Central, right, got it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Missed it.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Motion to close the hearing.
Board has, oh yeah, and
I'll make
motion.
that motion.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, and abstain.
Stop with that.
Get on the game here,
It's
man.
hard for me to write who did it. Sheesh.
Sheesh.
Alright, so the board has 14 days to write up their decision. It'll probably be written up within the next day or two. And it will go on file with the town clerk. A copy of the board's decision will go to any abutters that were notified initially, so you'll have a copy of that approval. There is no appeal period on a site plan approval unless you choose to hire a lawyer and go directly to Superior Court. So there's no official zoning appeal period on a site plan. But you can still sue anybody you'd like.
Beauty
It
of
is America,
America.
after all. So there's not a zoning process for that in this case.
All
All right,
Want to read the next one?
are you back on now?
Get back on.
Allow me to. Otherwise,
Wayne back on, Wally
I'm
back
off.
to associate status.
In accordance with the provisions of the Sutton zoning bylaw section 4C site plan review, the planning board will hold a hearing on the application of Corey Simpson of Sutton, Mass. to locate Atlas Tuning and Performance, automobile performance enhancement, in the existing structure owned by John Road LLC of Sutton, Mass. at number 12 John Road, Unit E. The hearing will be held at the Sutton Town Hall, 3rd floor, Monday, June 19th, at 7:25 p.m. A copy of the application can be inspected at the office of the town clerk during normal office hours. And Corey's here. Hi, Corey.
Have a presentation, give us a little presentation.
No, I don't have presentations. Basically, it's just automobile performance shop. We moved to the area last August. I've been doing it in Illinois for 16 years. Stick with what you know, right?
All right, so can you explain to the board kind of the ins and outs, why you are not an auto repair shop, why you're not an
Yeah,
auto
pretty much.
body, why it's
Yeah, we
different?
don't- no auto body, I'm not, pretty much people with new Corvettes, new Mustangs, just the new muscle cars is pretty much all I work on. I try to stay away from anything that's maybe more than 5 years old. Just, they'll bring the car in, they'll maybe put a, bolt on a supercharger, aftermarket supercharger, exhaust system, and tune the car on the chassis dyno and send them down the road, and that's pretty much the whole business model right there.
Supercharger.
Yes.
So no fluids really?
No oil changes, no engine changes, no transmission swaps, nothing involving fluid changes or.
So you keep the engine and transmission in, and you
Yes.
modify
Yes.
it.
And I work, a lot of the new cars, like the new Corvette Z06, the new Dodge Hellcat, they already have a supercharger on them from the factory. So we will change the pulley to make more boost and put a shorter belt on it and tune the car. It's really pretty easy on the new car. It's nice.
Well, we got superchargers, pulleys, and belts.
Yes.
I'm trying to get all the relevant terms in here, but no fluids and
Right.
transmission oil, et cetera.
I do not want to own it.
All right, anticipated hours of operation,
Probably 9 to 5 on weekdays. Weekends occasionally open if maybe a car club wants to come and 10 or 15 guys will show up with their cars and want to put their car on the dyno and see how much horsepower it makes and strap it on the dyno, make 2 dyno pulls and show them the results and cycle through all 10 or 15 cars or whatever in a day. Guys they like to do that. So.
see who has the.
Yeah, I usually do that on Saturday or something when they can everybody's off work. So.
All right, any large truck trips generally,
No, just deliveries basically if I get any.
like FedEx or
FedEx,
UPS?
UPS, yeah, nothing probably in a large truck. Have to move my equipment in the shop.
Oh, so the initial startup.
Yeah,
Number of employees,
just myself for now. Hopefully, maybe another person in a year or so.
one, maybe
Business,
2.
yeah.
So in this case, you're moving into a space that exists that was occupied by some other company.
Yes, yes, it was.
And
I
so
believe
you-
there was an insulation company there and a marble company and.
Oh, that's
We
what
did
Sylvia Marble was?
I worked with the manager. CRV Development no longer owns the facility, so I worked with Tim Mullen, who is still the property manager. We pulled the site plan that is still valid, still in place, and he sent me this email dated June 1st, which tells you exactly who's in the building
there?
now.
Yeah.
And you'll see the parking table for the current users to make sure we have more than enough parking. As you usually require every time a user changes, I like to make sure this is updated to make sure everything's still in compliance. So you can see it's brace integrated, it's IVA. They gave up Unity, IVA. They used to be in Unity. So now Corey's going into Unity, Northern Machinery's in F&G, and VNC Cryotech is in H still. So those are the current users. Ran the parking calcs. There's more than enough parking spaces for those uses. So the only thing we didn't address on this one was if you're gonna have signage.
Yeah, there's they have a sign for the whole units out the street. There's a couple blank spaces there, and I'll probably have some kind of sign on the door or maybe on the garage door.
Okay. So any signage you put in place, you just have the sign company draw it up, and it comes through the planning office before you get it
Yeah, I was reading
fabricated.
up on that, yeah.
Don't be one of the people that says, but I spent $1,500, you
Yeah.
can't disapprove it.
Right, it can only be so many square feet, yeah.
So at multi-tenant sign on 146
Mhm.
and on the building. And there are size restrictions on that, and you can give me a call and I can
Yeah,
tell you what
yeah,
those are.
So the vehicles you work on, how many vehicles would you have around?
Because it's just me, maybe, I mean, the shop, I mean, you could probably get maybe 10 or 12 in the shop, but. maybe
Inside?
4, yeah, inside. And I wouldn't want a parking car like that outside in the middle of
Right.
the hour night, and definitely
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
So, it depends how big how maybe in the spring, you get a lot of demand. And instead of turning the work away, you kind of get them in the door and
Mhm.
turn them around as quick as you can. But maybe say 5 or 6 cars in the shop at any time typically.
So you have to you're putting the lifts in, you're putting the dyno in, that's all your stuff that you have to
Yes.
set up.
How long is the car usually on site?
You can get tied up waiting for a part or something, it might be there for a week or two, but usually you got it lined up with the customer, what the plan is, what they want to do with it, you know, if they want exhaust or not. You get all the parts in hand first before they bring the car over to you. I get people, in Illinois, I was getting people from 5 states. They would ship cars over on, you know, shipping companies and have them dropped off to me and have them picked up when they were done, so. It's not typically a lot of foot traffic.
But it says you might have 10 to 20 clients daily.
Well, I do sell parts also. So
Oh,
I
you sell parts?
Sell parts on the internet, yeah, just performance parts, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so sell parts on the internet, and, you know, that was maybe on the weekend when I have a dyno day for a club or something, we might have
Okay.
10 or 20 people, maybe. Depends how many show up.
But that's more an accessory, really, your main business is.
Right, yeah, that's just,
Alrighty, any more questions? So, supercharging, automobile services, accessory sales, some parts.
So the part you take off, if you're bringing a new car in and you're taking the exhaust system off, you're probably selling that.
no, usually the customer wants it back.
Or he wants it
Yeah,
back.
in case they want to put the car back stock.
Because it's not,
So-
well, maintain it as stock, because it's not trash. You're not really
No,
taking
they're not
off
trash.
junk off these things.
No, these are nice new cars, yeah, they always want the parts back.
In
Okay.
case the wife gets wise.
Yeah.
What is that racket? What is
I
that
better
racket?
keep that.
Never seemed to work for me.
I have the same problem.
I watch Velocity, so I know some of the stuff you're talking about.
Jim, well, first of all, Corey, thank you very much for coming in and doing it right. I get a sense you'd like to do things right, so
Yes.
I'm happy to have you in town. I don't have anything that needs any supercharging, though. I'm at the other end of the scale.
Must be horses.
With vehicles, yeah. And I appreciate the property owner keeping us up to date as to who's in what units, because that hasn't always been the case, if you will. So it's nice to keep track, and I can't encourage you enough to make contact with the fire department, because they want some kind of high-tech fire thing. A Knox box.
Knox
Oh,
box.
it's not, it's just a thing on the door.
Yeah.
Just so they can get in there.
When the
Right.
fire department's happy, we're happy.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know,
Yeah, you have nitro? You work with nitro?
Oh, nitrous oxide? No, pretty much turbocharged, supercharged. I've
That's
never
fine,
really
is
done a
enough.
lot of
get
Yeah.
the police
nitrous cars.
interceptor down there.
Yeah, now you know where you can take your farm walk to get it dynoed, you know?
Nothing is needed doesn't go that low.
I'd be happy to make a motion.
Are there any questions from the public? Nick?
Robert Nunmacher, 24 Singletary Ave, about the noise and the exhaust.
The noise, the car, they will be noisy, but we have I leave the door shut when we do it. Make a dyno pull,
Dyno.
full throttle, and leave the garage door shut, and then open them up afterwards to let the air out.
Are you an end unit or?
Middle, I'm in the middle, unit E. So it's actually right behind, I'm on 16 Stephen. It's directly behind my house,
So it's-
unit.
so conceivably, the people on either side
Well,
would be hearing this noise?
IBA is warehouses. The 2 units on to the right are both warehousing only. And the
Yep.
2 units to this side is Northern Machinery doing metal cutting.
Yes.
Well, it's a lot quieter than what this thing could
So, yeah,
potentially
I
be.
mean, what you call it, we used to have SSRI, I think, in there on units A and B, which would be a potential issue, but they're gone. So now you have Brace Integrated, they just do office and warehouse for scaffolding and installation on units A and B. You have
They're actually the
IDA,
landlords, actually.
which is just pure warehousing, an occasional person in there, and C and D. These guys would be E, and then Northern Machinery is cutting metal in units F and G, and then H is B and C cryo, which is welding again and fabrication for cryogenic and medical industries. So it's actually a true industrial kind of building now in an industrial district, which is kind of nice.
So, well, let's just talk about the dyno then. When you run a dyno, it's not a long-term,
No, you
Test.
you get the car up to maybe 50 miles an hour in 4th gear, go full throttle from about 2,500 to red line, and it takes seconds, maybe 4, 5, 6 seconds, then let off the throttle, and that's it.
And that's it?
Yep. Maybe you might have to do it maybe
Might do it a
5,
few
10
times,
to
but
get
it's,
a car dialed in right, but
this runs in the percentage of time of operation, it's a very small
very
percent.
small, yes.
Very small percent.
The building, so obviously, any approval you grant, you want the, all other required approvals, because I'm sure the building department will be looking at, you know, do they need something specific for exhaust? Do they need, I wanted to get on the record so the building commissioner could see it, you saying there's really no fluids and stuff, because that plays into floor drains or no floor drains.
Yeah, there are no
those kind
floor
of
drains
things.
that I saw in the building.
So, those are things he's gonna ask again before he gives you occupancy. So, and he'll probably ask the exhaust question as well, I would hope.
Yeah, I do have an exhaust fan to hook up to the tailpipes,
Okay,
Yeah.
car to install and everything.
but that should be a normal part of your approval of all other required blah, blah, blah.
Signage is a planning office for approval.
Mhm.
Any other comments? We have any up there?
I'll make a motion that we approve Atlas Tuning and Performance for 12 John Road. And obviously that all required approvals and permits will be, all of the applicable boards will have to weigh in and give you their requirements.
Especially fire.
Fire.
Yeah.
And that, make sure you bring the sign in. It seems like you're low key anyway, so that shouldn't be, you don't need anything blinking on 146. And you have to install a Knox box right now for the fire department.
So just
Welcome
leave it down and
aboard.
see what they want.
Okay.
Second.
Let's just, I guess the fire related to the exhaust?
No, fire department was the Knox box.
Oh, that's the Knox box, so the
Yeah.
exhaust system is whose
And I mean, the
responsibility?
building
Okay.
department may check in with the fire department on that whole issue, just to make sure they're
So maybe
comfortable.
that, okay, so that's a board permit in town.
Yeah,
That's
all
all.
other
Okay.
required, yeah.
All right,
That's covered.
okay, so has it been seconded?
It has.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
Okay, your approval, 14 days to write it up, we'll probably
Close the
have it in the
meeting.
next 2 days.
Zoom.
Make a
You'll get
motion
copy
to
of
close
it.
the public hearing?
Who was the second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Abstained?
In 14 days to write it up, you'll probably get it in the next few days, and then a copy of it goes to anybody that was notified of the hearing. Then you just need to powwow with the fire department and the building department to get
That's
your
all squared away. Yeah.
permission.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome to Sutton.
Ben will be thrilled to hear this. Oh my
Yeah.
God, over the moon.
In accordance with the provisions of the Sutton zoning bylaw, section 4C, the site plan review, and section 50, large-scale solar photovoltaic. The planning board will hold a hearing on the application of Dean Smith, Borrego, did I say it right? That's right. Borrego Solar Systems for construction of a nearly 2 MW ground-mounted solar generating facility on land owned by Dwayne and Bruce Vander Knopfler in Whitensville, Mass. The project will be located at 263 Purgatory Road. The hearing will be held at the Town Hall, 3rd floor, on Monday, the 19th of June at 7:40 PM Planning Board time. The application will be, can be inspected in the office of the town clerk during normal office hours. Welcome aboard.
Good evening, board. My name is Zach Farkas with Borrego Solar. I came before you guys in April, and I think again in May, to discuss the photovoltaic overlay district that this board, through a couple of revisions, supported through town meetings. So I just wanted to thank you all for your support through that. This is really the first step, or the following step, after the overlay was approved during town meeting. And we're hoping that we can use this evening to introduce the project, introduce ourselves. We were talking very conceptually the last time I was here, so now we're getting in a lot more detail with the entitlement plans through your board as well as the Conservation Commission as well as with the town of Northbridge. So with me is Dean Smith, civil engineer for the project, Borrego, and John DuPont. John is the director of technology and engineering for the energy storage division. So I'll let Dean kind of give an introduction to the project and the narrative, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Good evening. Just to give you a general location of the project, this is Purgatory Road here to the south of our site, 146 along the west perimeter. This pink or magenta line, the heavy line, is the subject parcel that we're applying for. That's the parent parcel. This clearing that runs through the site is a gas easement. There's a gas line easement that bisects the property. What we're planning on doing is developing our solar array in the northeastern part of the site. This is the approximately 2 megawatt solar array. This highlighted line here is our proposed maintenance and access easement.
Can you show me that again, sorry? With the access easement?
This whitish line.
Does that exist today, or would that be?
It does not.
Okay.
And it comes in between, there's a rock outcropping here and the
highway?
the guardrail from the highway. So we would come between those. This is actually used in practice to get access for maintenance on the gas line easement, but we would just be formalizing that for our purposes. So it'll be a gravel roadway that basically follows the gas line easement, and then there's a small wetland area here that actually extends over. The town line is our parcel line here. So we're in Sutton, these properties are in Northbridge. So a portion of our maintenance access road will come through Northbridge. These properties that are adjacent here are also all owned by the Vandenackers. So the applicant here, the family owns all of these parcels that are here. They have an existing firewood operation that is situated here. Most of this that you see on the aerial is stockpiles of timber and firewood materials. So for construction, we had shown on our application coming in through the existing driveway up through the timber operation and then cutting it to join with our maintenance road. It may be more practical in the long run to come all the way north through the timber operation and in this way, so we may need to modify our proposed construction process. We are staying a minimum of 50 feet outside of the wetland resources in all cases. As Zach mentioned, we've made applications for a notice of intent with your local Conservation Commission. Because a portion of it extends into Northbridge, we're also going to be filing a notice of intent with the Northbridge Conservation Commission. We submitted this site plan to the planner for Northbridge as well as the building inspector, and we're requesting a ruling on them as to what kind of application we need for the use itself and for the maintenance access road. In the discussions with the planner, he was basically leaving it up to the building inspector, so we're not sure if we need to take some kind of application before the planning board in Northbridge, or whether it would just be a building permit for a maintenance access road. One thing to point out about that is, once the system is in operation, it's monitored remotely for performance and energy production. The only time that personnel really come onto the site is 3 to 4 times a year for things like drainage maintenance and mowing of the grass. After the system is constructed, we will seed all of the disturbed areas with native grass mixes, and we let them grow up to their full height, and we mow 2 to 3 times a year. So there's not really much occasion to be on the site once it's in operation, so there'd be very, very little traffic coming and going through this proposed driveway location. The solar array itself will be surrounded by a security fence. The project is being built for National Grid, so National Grid will own and operate the facility. Their preference is for an 8-foot tall chain link fence with a 1-inch mesh. So that's what's proposed there. Inside the fence is approximately 9 acres total in our proposed system. We would be proposing clearing outside that. We need to clear some trees to prevent shading of the solar system. So the total area to be cleared is proposed to be 15.3 acres. And the majority of that is outside the wetland buffer areas, but I could give you a breakdown of that if you're interested. It is on our plan set, on the tree clearing plan. It's all broken down by the area within the 100-foot buffer to the wetland areas and then the area without. Within our construction area and the system area, we would clear up the trees so we can remove all the stumps in that area. Outside our fence line, our systems will be on a TerraSmart racking system, which is supported by ground screws. So there's not a lot of excavation required for the 4 ground screws on each rack, and they just screw directly into the ground. They give us a lot of options because they can be pre-drilled, they go right through rock, and that kind of thing. There is a fair amount of rock on the site, so we're going to be dealing with that.
Capitalize that.
Yeah, we did capitalize.
We did, last time we did.
No, not that site, another site.
Each of those racks is supported with 18 individual on them. To get up to the 2 megawatt system size, we have 5,670 modules total proposed for this system. The property itself is vacant, rural residential zoning, R1 zoning. We are within the recently approved solar overlay district, which extends from the North Bridge line out here along 146 and a little bit to the east of our parcel. It is shown on our plan set, so you can see where the perimeter of the solar overlay district is. It's bounded on the east and north by vacant rural residential parcels. If you go further to the east or to the northeast, then there is some existing rural residential beyond that. To the south and east is mainly the Van den Eckers firewood operation. And at the very south of their properties, there are 2 residences that are owned by the Van den Eckers as well. The nearest residence to our modules is up here to the northeast. It's 566 feet, give or take, from the modules themselves. The nearest residence to our proposed equipment area, which is right here central to our site, is 1,065 feet. So there's quite a bit of separation from the equipment and the nearest existing residential use.
What's the name of that street that's coming in on the northeast corner?
This
Yeah,
one?
yeah.
That's Danlin Drive.
Oh, that's in Northbridge, right?
It is in Northbridge.
Yeah,
That's in
and then
Northbridge.
Winchell is the closest one in Sutton.
It is in Sutton?
Danlin?
Can you show the approximate town line?
This boundary line right
Yeah, so
here.
Danlin's just north of it.
And this doesn't show too much beyond our site, but this is our proposed site plan at a little larger scale. So the town line between Sutton and Northbridge is running right here along this southeast line, and it continues off to the north and east of the north side. So this is just a bigger representation of what I was talking to you about. This is the proposed maintenance and access easement up through here. This is our electrical equipment area. So there'll be transformers, there'll be a weather station and data acquisition system. On the north side of that, there's also another feature of this proposed system. There's an energy storage component. So that's along the north side of this equipment area. It's a
Battery.
batteries, yes.
It's what you saw on the rack system in Northbridge
battery
at
storage,
1152. We just did one at National
Okay,
Grid's
so
facility.
you're somewhat familiar with those.
Mhm.
So, and John is in our energy storage division, so he's here to answer any questions you might have. As I mentioned, it's on a rack system that's ground screws, so there's very little ground disturbance involved there. The area that is disturbed by our construction, we come back in and seed with the native grass mixes. I didn't present a noise calculation because we're so far from the existing residences. Generally, between 150 and 175 feet from these equipment areas, the noise level falls back below ambient, so it's not noticeable once you get 200 and more feet away from it. But if the board is interested in that, we can provide a calculation regarding noise. Because the system's only in operation during the daytime hours, there's only one proposed light, which is a pole-mounted light that's just right here at the equipment area. If there ever were a need for some maintenance personnel to go on site after dark. It's a motion-activated light, LED. It's shielded and directed downward, so that it only casts light very close to the vicinity of the equipment area. And that's the basics of what we've got proposed here. We're here to answer any questions. We came tonight, even though we've received some peer review comments, and I believe that Jen might also have some comments that we need to address. There's a letter regarding some particulars from the town of Northbridge, so we know that we have some issues to resolve before submitting to the final approval, but we wanted to give you the general information on the proposed project, get input from the board members, and if there were members of the public that were interested in here, we also wanted to get them input in case there were issues that they needed us to resolve.
So who received public notification of this public hearing?
There were two sets of abutters. There is the certified abutters list in Sutton as well as the certified abutters list in Northbridge, a total of about 11 abutters. Many of them Vandernackers.
Yeah, most of the
family
properties
members
that are abutting in
Beaupre, Vandernacker, Orvis and Corp, which is Dan G. Faber, and then a number of people in Northbridge. So, I mean, you have Graves Engineering's comment. A lot of that is relative to stormwater management.
Yeah.
The plans submitted are often, for our solar projects, are often very, very good on the electrical components and those details, and site plan details sometimes are a little less. So my comment letter, which you will have tomorrow before noontime, it's got some basic questions, and some of them relate back to the letter you have dated June 19th from Northbridge, and just zoning issues that really need to be ironed out. Mine also includes the location of the no access line. You cannot count frontage for this parcel on 146 because it is absolutely no access.
Okay.
So the frontage on this parcel cannot be called off 146. It has to be called off Purgatory Road. And you have that no access line for Mass Highway. So there's got to be authority to cross the no access line for access into the parcel, and then just working with the town of Northbridge to show you've got adequate frontage for your proposed use and anything else that's there on the same parcel. So that's a big issue that just needs to be worked out, because it's a huge precedent set, and we can't mess with that. So other than that, I just see a lot of details, and they relate to stormwater management. We've got some basin plans on the site plan that don't have elevations. They don't have inlet outlet structures, and maybe some of them don't have outlet structures or their infiltration, but we need to see those things, and you'll see that called out in Graves' comments. It's a lot of details, and there may be some waiver requests necessary. So the big issues are really just zoning, access, those kind of issues. And that's why, I don't know that I'd continue this for 2 weeks. I think I would really hop it to the next meeting to make sure that when they come back, we're not wasting your time or their time, and that we are coming back with a clean plan with all these questions answered. But that's up to you guys.
Through the chair, I have a question.
Yeah.
Jen was talking about frontage. Who is going to own the parcel of land? It'll continue to be owned by Vanden Ackers, leased by National Grid, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so frontage-wise, where the Vanden Ackers own the firewood and all the way to Purgatory Road,
That's correct.
the letter from Northbridge kind of leads me to believe that they're saying no.
They need a ruling on mixed use on one parcel, if it's all part of one parcel. And that's one of my comments. One of my first comments on the site plan is way too many lines on the site plan. You got town lines, you got overlay lines, you got lot lines, and you can't tell what any of them are. So it's very hard to tell, and that needs to be fixed. So it's real clear on the site plan where the lot lines are. Pull out any overlay district lines. Even the town line can just fade back. You need to see those lot lines. And then Northbridge really needs to give us kind of a ruling on whether you can do what's on the Vanden Ackers parcel already, if it's on the same parcel, and that access road through the residential. And I know there's some assertions in terms of public utility, blah, 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 that you guys can make, and you gotta get that information to them so we can get a ruling out of them.
Absolutely, and as Dean summarized, we recognize the importance of that to this board, to the project, and
Yeah,
we'll
huge.
certainly should focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, the location, from a visibility standpoint and a placement standpoint, there's zero wrong with it. It's just making all the legalities and the work. So, and like I said, one of those things is gonna be access and the location of that Mass DOT no access line and how that works. And like you said, if you're shifting this way, maybe you get around that. If you're coming outside that no access line and coming in this way, you may deal with that, no problem, but.
Yeah, we're in communication with the DOT.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
have
you may-
already touched base with them and
Great.
provided our site plan.
Great.
I spoke with one of the reviewers there. He didn't seem to think that it sounded problematic, but we haven't gotten far enough to have a real determination from them.
Just finding the right person at Mass DOT is sometimes the hardest part.
It took a number of calls to get.
So I did talk to Gary directly. Like I said, I was at the MAVPD conference with Gary Bechtold, and we talked about this just briefly on our walk. And per his letter here, you know, it is really the building commissioner that they lean on for those, because he's a zoning enforcement officer like John is here. But it's very collaborative over there, but it's ultimately his kind of say.
Right.
So, and I know he wants to, he's kind of leaning on the building commissioner to really take a look at this and kind of make a decision. You know,
Yeah.
is it go, is it no go, is it go with this? So you just need to make sure you.
We did provide our site plan to
Mhm.
Mr. Sheehan, the building official over
Yeah,
there,
I'm not-
around the time that we made the application here. So it's just a matter of not having been able to contact him.
It's tough this time of year. So, yeah, I mean, that's the big issue.
Mhm.
Just the zone.
Yeah, I mean, we can say, yeah, it looks good and approve it and everything, if you can't get in there. What
Yeah.
good is it?
It's pretty rare for the board to give an approval on a project of this size, contingent on
Right,
their town's
access.
approval of your access. So that needs to be ironed out. And unfortunately, that part of my, I don't think this should be a 2-week continuance is because we're at fiscal year end. Fiscal year in municipalities is July 1. So everybody's taking vacations. Because if you don't use your time in most communities, you lose it. So you're gonna find the month of June is a very vacant time in a lot of town hall. So I'm worried that, are you even gonna get Gary and or the building commissioner? Are you gonna get your Mass DOT guys who work on the same exact time frame in terms of fiscal years? So that's all, I mean, normally we could do a 2-week and see where you stand even, but I don't know if you're gonna get too far in 2 weeks. And it would behoove us to for you to bring in the most complete plan when you come back, but.
Yeah, I think we agree that, Mr. you're all aware, National Grid has posted a pretty aggressive deadline on us, so if you guys wouldn't mind continuing for 2 weeks, and I think we can continue the communication with Jen, and if we feel like we don't have something presentable to you guys that's a material step from where we are, we can issue that request for continuance through a letter.
And I believe the continuance would actually be 3 weeks because of the holiday. Your dates are the 10th and 24th in July, so July 10th is 3 weeks.
It's up to you.
Works for me.
Thank you.
Which would be what, June, what's the next meeting? June?
July 10th.
Oh, July 10th.
Yeah.
And you'll let us know.
I think we're gonna give every effort to come to you guys on July 10th with a complete set where we'll ask for you to close and rule, but we understand the hurdles in front of us, so we don't want to waste your time, but we'd like the opportunity to stay on schedule.
Right, if we haven't resolved issues with Northbridge or with your peer review or your planning director.
Going up to that supercharger guy and see if he can make it.
What
Plus,
do we
do
have?
everything and make contact.
Are there other things on the menu? Oh, menu, the agenda on the 10th?
Hungry?
No?
Well, I see you guys working.
We're busy that night.
Just these guys.
We'll be on the dyno.
Nick has something to say.
Nick?
Robert Nuttamacher, 24 Singletary Ave, Board of Assessors. How far is any of this equipment from the town line?
Well, I didn't do it exactly to the town line, but we are about 250 feet from the town line, just estimating off the site plan. I can give you an exact number later, but it's between 225 and 250, just based on what we've got here on the plan.
That's the electrical equipment.
If you were down to 50 feet, I'd get...
No, it's definitely more than
That's,
50 feet.
that's the electrical equipment you pointed to, not the panels.
No, not the panels. The panels are meeting the setback that's required of
50
50 feet.
That's
So
what he's talking about.
some of those are
That's the question.
only a little over 50 feet away from our
So the
property.
panels will be 50 feet away? How are you determining where the town line is?
We have a survey of the property, so we have a surveyed boundary that we're working with.
So monuments, town line monuments?
Yes, and we don't have the survey drawing back, but they provided the boundary and the topography for the site ahead to us. And so we're just waiting for the Alta survey on the property.
So there's no question that it's totally in Sutton?
Yes, there's no question.
Okay, you realize also this property is classified as Chapter 61A agricultural, and you have to go through that withdrawal process in the town of Sutton, which can take 3 months.
Yes, sir, we do. Often, we go through the 61A process after the permits have been approved and understanding the process, but we don't like to pull it out if there's going to be no project because of the hassle that would cause the landowner. But thank you.
And lastly, what's the zoning in the town of Northbridge?
It's R1 zoning on the adjacent parcels in the town of Northbridge. And from the input that we've had from our real estate attorney, being that it's a public utility facility that's being built by National Grid, public utilities are allowed use in the R1 zone of Northbridge.
So you need that determination, obviously.
That's right.
So what if the town of Sutton decides they'd like to purchase this property and coming out of Chapter 61?
The project will be forfeited. We will stop development of the project.
Well, you've clear cut it?
No.
No, we wouldn't.
Prior to
Okay.
starting construction or.
That would be one of our
requesting to
conditions
build-
for
Okay,
approval.
well, he brings up an interesting point that just came up.
That's a standard condition for entitlement permits.
Okay.
Prior to the building permit, the applicant has to remove the property from 61A.
Okay.
Yeah. On our other site, that it's nearing completion of construction, rocks were an issue. I don't honestly recall what their anchoring system was, but basically they had the kind of the same plan issue. To inside the fence, everything goes we grade it, we do what we need to do, and then we'll seed it. Outside the fence, we're just cutting trees, leaving stumps, and the understory, and anything below 5 feet, basically, for a certain distance. Actually, for a certain distance, close to the property line. When they got into construction, they kept digging up boulders and throwing them on top of the understory plantings in the outside buffer, ruining all of the understory buffer, basically making an extreme mess of the site. And they had to come back in, and the board said, it's New England, there's rocks, too bad. And we're talking large piles of boulders. And they had to bury or truck off trucks and trucks of rocks.
Yeah, we've seen that site. I'm aware of the visibility of the main public ways and whatnot. I think our siting here is good. Our available space, if we needed to make space for some boulders and whatnot, we could utilize. But basically, you'll see our grading plan on the next revision is going to be pretty minor. We know what's out there. We're not expecting to move a lot of it.
Okay.
And the technology we're selecting is quite flexible.
Our rack
topography.
systems accommodate a big variation in topography.
Great.
They can easily accommodate up to 20% slopes, and in certain instances over that. So we're not proposing pushing a lot of materials around.
Great.
Some of the buried rock that's apparent on site, we walked it with our site contractor last week, so he's seen the site and he thinks that he can deal with the rock that he sees there. Those buried rock, he calls it pop them. So he can, it's not blasting, but they break the rock above the surface so that it's low enough that you can build the racks over top of it. So he's confident that he can handle the rock on site.
So you have a letter from Graves, you have a letter from Northbridge, you'll have literally a checklist from me. So when you respond, you're going to respond point by point. So you'll have Graves Engineering point by point response, and Graves and I and Northbridge can provide you with the Word document so you can just, lay them in. And so you'll see my comment on rocks. So in that comment, you want to make sure you say, here's what we're going to do. If we run into rocks, we're either going to stack them here, we're going to process them and get them off the site. You need to address that. Here's how we're not going to ruin the understory stuff. Okay?
I thought I heard you said you were gonna drill, which is.
Sometimes they pre-drill for the supports for the rack system.
They can go into a rock?
They can go through rock.
When I heard that, I said, the people up the road and on the other side probably wish they had done that, as opposed to, and it felt terrible saying it to them, but the rocks, it just kept coming.
Yeah, we've done a full geotechnical analysis of the site so that we use that subsurface analysis to select the technology we're going to use for racking.
And drilling.
It's it's not cheap, right? It costs about $10,000 to do that report. So you can see how it's easy to skip that now and figure out later. So
yeah,
like
with the Terraform
Yeah.
system with the ground
Right.
screws is very accommodating of
Right.
all
Yeah, I
kinds
think,
of subsurface.
I think there's some
conditions.
regrets with that up the street. Though I have to say, I'm actually doing a site visit on that in the next few days. And
Rocks are leaving.
it's amazing how they made those rocks disappear. But I'm sure it was more than $10,000 worth of effort.
Nick, you have another comment?
Is this property going to be leased to National Grid?
yes, sir.
Yes.
What kind of arrangements is there going to be made for the taxes? Is there going to be a pilot, or is this going to go on their personal property?
I think we're happy to enter into discussions with the town at the appropriate time. Generally, it's either assessed at its personal property value or a pilot is signed to spread that assessed value over the 20 years. Generally, we're happy doing either and working with the town. Just a matter of how it works out. If we can come to an agreement, we do. If not, we just go through the normal assessment process.
All right, we want a motion to continue this? Do you have any other questions, or
July
continue
10.
to July 10?
And it would be 7:05 PM.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed and abstained.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Okay, gentlemen.
Nice easel. You should grab it.
To adjourn?
Before I go.
Motion to adjourn. No.
Oh, yeah. Shake you. I don't ask any questions.
I brought the request.
Did they get the date?
You already gave us a separate one for the hearing yet, right? Did you give us a separate one for the hearing yet?
But it's some type of question that roll